Hello, I'm Anthony. Welcome to this new video series in which we're going to have a look at Reactor 6. And more specifically, we're going to look at Reactor 6 from the perspective of writing music, making music. That's what it's all about. Now, Reactor 6 is a vast instrument capable of allowing you to design quite literally your own synthesizer from the very ground up, component by component. That's not currently where my focus is. I want to be very clear about the brief of this video series. For now, we're only really interested in treating Reactor 6 as a modular wall. I want to build my own modular wall, and I can do it with Reactor 6, but I can do it using a fairly small subset of the features of the entire product. The reason why I mention this right at the outset is because when you load an instance of Reactor, this is the decision that you're faced with, and it's not immediately obvious which of these three options I'm supposed to pick. But if we have a look at the middle one, it says experiment with patching modular racks. That's exactly what I want to do. So without worrying for now what the other two options are, I'm just going to click this middle one. And this is what the interface looks like. We're currently in rack mode. You can tell that we're in rack mode by having a look at this toolbox across the top. See these buttons over here, particularly the one that's currently highlighted, ports and wires view. You only see that if you're in rack mode. This is where we want to be. The other option available to us is to be in ensemble mode. And the reason why Reactor presents this option to you is historical. Until about 2019, racks didn't exist. It's a pretty new concept. Now, Reactor is a very old instrument. Before the invention of racks, ensembles were the primary top-level container in which everything lived. I'm going to show you what an ensemble looks like now. I don't want you to worry too much about how I'm getting there. We'll have a look at this a little bit in more detail today. But I'm just going to click this thing, and you can see there's a .ens suffix. That's for ensemble. Just going to load this. So I can just double click it. I just loaded an ensemble. So even though it looks relatively similar, we've got the same kind of visual appearance. This is an ensemble. The top toolbar is different. We have an edit button. We've lost that ports and wires button that we had. And if I click this edit button, the top couple of rows of the interface get much more complicated, and we've got all sorts of different options to choose from. This is the kind of stuff that just for now I'm going to avoid, but just to show you that there's a historical context here. This is how Reactor used to look for all instruments across the board. And racks tried to take away some of that complexity and give you a simpler interface, so that in order for you to, if you're just getting your feet wet for the first time with this instrument, it gives you what you really want right out of the box, or at least what I want, which is the ability to patch together modular components. So with that said, I'm going to get us back to our initial rack. I'm going to do it with this little triangle button at the top. You want to get used to using this menu, and I can say File, New Rack. It'll ask me if I want to throw all of this stuff away. And here we are back where we started with our rack toolbar. So that's to show you these two different views. If you're ever confused as to whether or not you're in rack or ensemble mode, look for that button. That's the easiest way to see it. If you can see that, it's a rack. If you can see the word edit, it's an ensemble. Now, each of those two interface types have advantages and disadvantages. There's no doubt at all that ensemble mode is going to ultimately provide us with a lot more power, because it gives us access to all of the underlying architecture of the instrument, and some of that is hidden from us in racks mode. For now, I don't care. I want to try and keep things simple because this is a difficult instrument to get to grips with. Let's have a look at these left-hand panes and try to figure out what's going on over here, because this isn't particularly intuitive either. We've got three tabs across the top: Player, Library and Files, and at the moment we're in Player View. This is the thing that's giving us access to those top-level structures that I was talking about, our ensembles and racks. There's no visual representation at all to distinguish ensembles from racks from this top-level menu, so it's immediately complicated. While we're here, we'll have a chat about what I've got installed as well. Now, I've got Native Instruments Complete 14, which bundles in with it Reactor 6, but Reactor 6 is the only component that we're really interested in from the bigger Native Instruments bundle. That's the one that's currently highlighted. I've also got two add-on modules which I will be using during this series. We've got Michael Hetrick's Euro React and the Toybox package. The Euro React and Toybox are by far the most popular, most commonly discussed two third-party add-ons for your native instruments, for your Reactor suite. I will be using them as part of this video series. Okay, let's have a look in the native instruments folder. Got a couple of folders at the top called blocks, bass, and blocks primes. And a little bit further down, we've got Reactor blocks wired. So this word blocks appears an awful lot, and you might be fooled into thinking that blocks bass, blocks primes, Reactor blocks, they're all kind of a similar family. Unfortunately, they're not. So what's a block? Well, a block is fundamentally the kind of the representation of a modular component. If you were building a modular wall, like a Euro rack, for instance, then you would be using blocks. Each one of those physical components is a block. And the concept of blocks was introduced in 2015. So for the first time, you could plug these things into Reactor, these plug and play blocks, and you could build modular instruments using them. So as you can see, when I single click on the Reactor blocks main header, you see all of these ensembles, the .ens extensions. So all of these instruments have been built using these Reactor blocks. Drag one in again, let's have a look at it. Now you can see I can pick these modules up, move them around, do what I want with it. So I've basically got full access to this modular environment. You can't see any patch cables, notice. That's one of the big differences between ensembles and racks. But you do get all of the components, and you can see via this horizontal split window all of the patch cables underneath. So we do have a fully fledged modular environment. This is what blocks introduced. 4 years later, racks come along and extend this concept to make it even closer to the concept of a modular wall, so that we've genuinely got all of these patch cables now, and a lot of the complexity that came along with blocks being an add-on to an already existing system, a lot of that was smoothed out with the concept of racks, and we end up with this much simpler interface. So this Reactor blocks folder here is dealing with ensembles. These instruments are ensembles. However, these folders up at the top, if we drill into the racks section, contain racks. You see NKSR, so this is the Native Instruments Native Control Standard, which is like a global standard that allows multiple manufacturers to develop hardware and software that's fully integrated with presets and, you know, fully configured knobs that do intuitive things. So the NKS standard is a global thing, and then this is an NKS rack. So if I drag one of these into the interface, now you can see what a rack looks like with all of our cables. We still have the ability to have that split view. See the show structure view button. If I open that, this is the old world view of those blocks. And in fact, the blocks in this view are functionally identical to the ones that we looked at earlier. And so we've got this really kind of confusing crossover between these two concepts, where you can drop a block into either an ensemble or a rack, and it will do the same job. It's really the top level interface that's different. And because racks are cleaner, that's where I've decided to start. So we're just going to stick with this view for now. And we're going to try to figure out how to build our own modular rack systems using this methodology. So from these options over on the left-hand window, which are the ones that we're most interested in? Well, blocks bass and blocks primes are the two Native Instruments folders that we're interested in. So both of these are going to give us access to racks, and we're going to be able to use any of these, and we'll get a seamless, consistent interface with our inputs and outputs and cables and all that good stuff. That's it for the Native Instruments stuff. I'll close that down. In the Euro, React and Toybox folders, we have similar options. So I'm opening Euro Rack now, and you can see blocks and racks. If I drill down into the racks options, here is Euro React rack, and again, our inputs and outputs. But we're using different components now. These are the third-party add-on components. So all of that is good. And here is the Toybox options. And once again, down here, we'll find racks that we'll be able to play with. So really think about racks as a preset. This is like a very top level container where all of the modules have been brought together and configured in a particular view. In our blocks folder, we can drill down into the blocks folders, and then these .ism, these are instruments, so we can pick these things up, drag them over onto our rack, and now we've got a new module to play with. Okay, that's a super fast introduction to the concept of what we're after. Let's simplify everything back down again to our completely default rack and start from here, try to figure out what's going on. And here's the difficulty with Reactor 6. If I press a key on my keyboard, you can see the note in light lighting up, but you're not going to hear any sound. There is no synthesizer to speak of when you start a Reactor 6 patch or rack. We need to build it. So for today's purposes, we're going to get the simplest possible sound that we can. I'm going to bring an oscillator into this rack and just get it to the point where it can make sound in response to me pressing keys on the keyboard. So without further ado, let's get underway. I'm going to open the native instruments folder, and I'm going to go to blocks, bass. Inside here, in our blocks folder, we're going to be spending a lot of time in this bento box folder. These are really core components. You can see the 3-letter acronyms at the front. This helps you to categorize stuff. We've got amplifiers and filters and mixers, modulators. Here is our oscillator, the bento oscillator. I'm going to pick one of these up. I'm going to drop it just after the note in module. We're still nowhere near actually making sound yet. We need to plug all of these modules together, but this oscillator is a thing that's capable of generating sound. It's currently set to generate a sine wave. Now this oscillator is immediately ready to do work. The moment it appeared in the rack, it said, I am good to go. I want to generate a sine wave. Just tell me how fast you want that sine wave to oscillate. Well, there's various different ways that we can do that. But if we take an output from this note in module, the top one's called pitch. I'm going to take a cable out of that socket, and I'm going to drop it into the pitch input of my oscillator. I'm going to take a cable out of the output into the input of this level, this meter control, and you can see here's our audio signal. So I turn it up, I'm going to turn it all the way down. I'm going to take an output from the level module into our final output stage. This is the thing that's connected into Cubase and is going to allow us to hear sound. And let's have it in both channels, left and right. And now when I turn the volume up, there's the very low note that I pressed on my keyboard. If I now press the highest note on my keyboard, there we go, one in the middle. So the keyboard generates a control voltage signal, basically a signal somewhere between 0 and 1. Basically all of the signals that we're going to be dealing with in this modular environment are going to range from -1 to +1. What that number means is going to depend entirely on what it's going into and where it's coming out from. But as far as this note-in module is concerned, it basically splits your keyboard up into lots of very slightly ascending values going from 0 to 1. And depending on what that precise number is, that's going to translate, if we plug it into the pitch connection of our oscillator, into generating a tone of a given pitch. Notice we don't even have any way to stop the sound. If the level's turned any above 0, we're going to hear it. We'll worry about those kinds of things later. We've actually met the brief. So now the final thing that I want to do for this episode is save this rack. And unfortunately, that's a little bit more complicated than it should be. If I go into File, Save, it's going to throw me up into this folder here. Can you see Native Instruments, User Content, Reactor, Racks? That's all very well and good. And I could save the rack here. You can see here was a test file that I created. The problem is that if we head back over to our browser, see this little picture of the person. If I click, this is our user folder. If I click the user folder, by default, you're not going to see this. You're basically not going to see in your visible browser the same option that you get when you go to save a file. We have a look in the preferences, I'll show you why. By default, this is where our racks live. Because it says user ensembles, but that's not true. It's ensembles and racks, because there are now 2 top level kind of containers, but the label is a throwback to the old world where there were only ensembles. So this is the folder that we're seeing in our user library, but by default it's going to be in a folder called Native Instruments Reactor 6 Player. I'll just show you this in an Explorer. Obviously this is a PC view, but you're going to have a very similar kind of thing in the Mac world as well. Here's my Documents Native Instruments folder. I've got a Reactor 6 folder with some stuff in. Here's Player. If I open Player, you can see Ensembles and Racks. And in the User Content folder down below, in Reactor, we've also got Ensembles and Racks. So for some inconceivable reason, the location that you save to by default is different to the location that you read from. That is an absolute mystery to me. I can't for the life of me imagine why they've done it. And so you can see that I've changed my user ensemble to point to the same folder that the Save As feature in the primary interface works. So I basically see what I'm saving. If I close this down, I'm going to save this file as rack 1. Say save. And it immediately appeared in the browser. I can now see it. So I heartily recommend that you change this preference on your user ensembles to point to basically whatever this is, and then add the word Reactor, so that basically the stub paths of these two locations are offset by one directory. The one down below doesn't have the word Reactor on, and this one does need the word Reactor on. There's nothing I can do to explain how or why that would be, but there you are. That's the situation that we're in. And we've done it. We've generated sound, we've saved the rack, and we're up and running. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Please hit like if you did, and I'll see you for the next one. Thanks very much for watching.